Hey everyone, TJBChris here. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're going to take a look at this. You are looking at my Tandy Disk Cartridge System. This is a 10 megabyte Bernoulli drive made by Iomega, but marketed by Tandy for use with the Tandy 6000, the Model 16, and the Tandy 1000 and 1200 machines. I also understand there was a controller for Tandy 2000 systems as well, and I believe that was for this, but they did have cartridge systems for that machine as well. This system costs $2,195, and that's just for the drive alone. If you wanted to get the interface kit, that is the expansion board for the Model 16 or Tandy 6000, that's another $119.95. And of course, for $200, you could get the 1000 or 1200 HD expansion board. Additional cartridges were $89.95 a piece, and you could add a second drive to double your storage and convenience for only $999. This was really marketed as an ideal way to both back up floppy and hard disks. That's interesting, spending a bunch of grand to back up floppy disks when you could, buy more floppy disks. But okay, I get it. While also being on-the-go portable hard disk-like storage, faster than a floppy, but slower-ish than most hard drives at the time, but fairly close. So tonight we're going to take a closer look at this system, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the changes I had to make in order to get it to work with this machine, and we're going to take a look at some, shall we say, quirks with this particular drive. So, let's get started. So of course I have two of the cartridges here that I got. I got a lot of the drive, 3 cartridges, and the interface board for the Model 16B off to the side here. To give you an idea, I even have a Tandy branded unused cartridge. How cool. And to give you an idea of how big these cartridges are, this is an 8-inch floppy disk, and it's even bigger than that. So these cartridges have a total capacity of 10 megabytes spread across 306 tracks with 512 bytes per sector. So how this drive came to be in my possession, of course, I said I found it on eBay and bought it from a seller that I'm familiar with. Actually, the seller was upfront about some individual quirks that this drive has. So once I got it in the mail, the very first thing I noticed was that, of course, it's got a little bit of missing paint. The metal on the top's a little worn, but otherwise it's in pretty good shape. And I also noticed that on the back was a D-sub connector. It was less than 50 pins, but the connector on the interface board that I got for the Model 16B was in fact 50 pins. So I took the drive apart, and in looking at the bracket and cable mount between the jack on the back of the unit and the drive, and looking closer, I noticed that the D-sub connector's pins were split on a ribbon cable among both sides of the IDC 50-pin connector, and in fact the middle pins were unconnected. So I took a closer look at the interface board and noticed that yes, indeed, those pins are unwired. And then I finally took another step and looked at the service documentation and technical doc that are available from Iomega for these particular drives, and noticed that those pins were unconnected. Thinking to myself, I don't really feel like making a D-sub cable. I thought, also, I have IDC cable parts and cable and a crimper right here in the house. Why don't I just make myself a straight-through cable and not have to worry about soldering a D-sub connector? And so that's what I did. I soldered it all together and then broke out the 3D printer, designed a quick little bracket that would allow me to mount my new connector within the chassis of the drive, and now I have a connector and cable that goes straight through from the drive to the interface in the Model 16B. But that's not all. We also ran into some other issues after I connected it up and tried to get it to work. First, that there were dip switch configuration settings that I had to make. Once I got that all done, the drive still didn't work. Looking back at the documentation, I noticed that there was a jumper block for a drive select 0 or 1, and it did appear to be drive 1. So now I reconfigured it and went right back to the machine, and hey, it worked! But while I was poking around in the drive, and the eagle-eyed viewers among you might have noticed, something's not quite right. If you're looking closely, the label on the back says Iomega. Why doesn't it say Radio Shack or Tandy? Well, when I took the drive apart, I figured out why, and that's because this is not in fact a Tandy drive. This is a standard Iomega drive. It was repaired with a Tandy front bezel that someone hot glued to the drive. I couldn't believe it. Now I'm not going to change this, and quite frankly, it is the same drive setup that Tandy used back in the day. It just had their nameplate, box, and manual, and sold through Radio Shack's chain of marketing and merchandising markup. Now that we have that working, I put the thing back together, hooked it all up to the machine, and all is working. So now that we are there, and you know a little bit of the backstory behind this without knowing too much, let's get to trying this thing out. I'm going to fire up the TRS-80 Diagnostics for the Model 2, which happens to contain routines for this very disk cartridge system. So we're going to power this thing up. I'm going to boot from the floppy drive, but because the hard drive is connected, we'll get to that. First things first, though, let's power up the disk cartridge system. And now with that powered up, I can feel the air coming through the drive. We're going to power up the Model 16B, and I'm going to tell it that I want to use a diskette by holding repeat and break. There's my drive light, and I should get the insert diskette prompt, which I do. We're going to throw up my trusty diagnostic diskette. Now, once we get into the diagnostic, I'll pull the camera in a bit, but I figured you want the whole experience here. So let's boot this thing up. Just drop that right there. So this video falls in vein of my XENIX 3.1 install video, where I installed XENIX from the real disks with a real floppy drive. It's like transporting back to 1986, folks. This is fabulous. I love the fact that I get to sit here and play with this, and that it works. Life is good, folks. Life is good. Okay, this is booting up. We are now in the menu, so I'm going to take this disk cartridge, and I'm going to load it into the drive, and it should spin up. And we're up. So I'm going to go to the drive menu. And now, let's take a look at the 10 meg diagnostics. All right, I've pulled the camera in a bit, but usually when I do videos on these, I zoom right up to the console. But this time, I wanted to leave the drive in the bottom corner here so you can see the activity LEDs. And it's going to ask, do I want the cartridge formatted never, once, or always? This cartridge is pre-formatted, and we're going to format it later in the video for use with XENIX. So I'm not going to format it now. I'm going to say never, and I'd like to use drive 0. So the first thing I get is a nice little SCSI identification screen, and you notice SCSI there. That's because this drive uses SASI, or I assume it's SASI. I would pronounce it SASI. Maybe it's sassy because it's sassy. I don't know. Okay, bad jokes. I'm not good at this. What do you want, folks? But either way, this is a precursor to SCSI. Now, this drive was released before the SCSI standard was formalized as SCSI in 1986, but the protocol was fairly close, if not pretty much figured out, and people were even calling it SCSI before it was officially ratified, as is obvious by this utility here. So we get device type, device qualifier 80, revision level SCSI 0, retries enabled, which is true. That's a dip switch on the drive, by the way. Startup diagnostics, and internal revision, firmware revision. So I'm going to push enter here, and it's going to immediately begin testing the drive. And now the light's going to blink, and we're not going to watch all of these go through. But now this lock drive latch, when you put the cartridge in, the drive latch is locked anyway. I could inject it if I wanted to, but that command tells the drive to not allow the button that you press to remove the cartridge, which we'll see later. So now we're doing a command sense. It's filled in the interesting bits about the disk. So we have a flag sector already. The interleave is 8. Our capacity is 98 FF blocks, no ECC, but we do have post-write CRC turned on, and there are no other errors so far. And I've noticed that there's, on this diagnostic, anytime it works with the drive, there are always 2 command retries. Don't know why that is. And 1 miscellaneous error that I don't know what that is, but maybe it's related to the command retries. And you can see it's counting up flag sectors here. We're up to 22, 23. Typically we get to 26 on 306 tracks. Now it's going to go through and sequentially write all 306 tracks. And as the write test comes to a close, you may notice the amount of ambient noise between the fans in the Model 16 and the fans in the disk cartridge system. And you might be thinking to yourself, TJBChris, why don't you replace the fans? Well, because the fans are part of the experience. Can you imagine working an entire day with this as your ambient noise with these machines? Old computers were loud. Now we've moved on to the read test. And so now we're reading each of the tracks. And I'm going to see if you can hear the sound of the head. And once the read test completes, there will be a few other tests. There's some seek test, random seek, slew seek, and some other good tests. And then it'll repeat the entire set of tests again until I hit Q to quit. Well, I've been through these tests a few times, and I'm not going to make you sit here and watch them, but this is a pretty comprehensive diagnostic for this drive, and it works fairly well. Unfortunately, this diagnostic, while it is on the diagnostic disk on the Model 2 archive, the 8-inch documentation for the diagnostics does not include anything about these modules. So, other than people playing with it, there's no formal documentation that's surfaced so far. So hopefully someone finds that, comes across it, and hopefully it exists, and it can be made available, but otherwise kind of flying by the seat of my pants. As far as I can tell, with all the keys I pushed the first few times I went through this, the only key that does anything on this keyboard is Q, which will quit, which it now just did. So I mentioned ejecting the cartridge. If I want to eject the cartridge, I just push this little button here. Light flashes while it spins down. And then I can turn the handle and remove the cartridge. So now that we've done that, why don't we reboot the machine, this time to XENIX, and we're going to actually format this cartridge for use with XENIX, and then we're going to go into XENIX, and we're going to talk about a couple of different ways that these cartridges could be used within XENIX itself. And I should note that as far as I know, the only operating systems on the Model 16 and Tandy 6000 to support this disk cartridge system was in fact XENIX. I don't believe there was any TRS-DOS software. If there was, by all means, please let me know. But I don't believe there was. And in fact, the marketing copy is very clear that this is for Models 16 and 6000. Doesn't mention 2 or 12. So I suspect that that would help back up my point. Anyway, let's hit the old reset button here. And here we are at the XENIX boot prompt. So I'm going to type diskutil. Because of the Z80-based I/O architecture of this system, disks, hard disks, floppy disks, and cartridges must be formatted with the Z80-based program called diskutil before they can have file systems made on them. So there's a two-step process to formatting physical disks. So I'm going to throw our cartridge right back in. This never gets old. Turn the handle. The drive will spin up. Oh, that never gets old, folks. And we're going to run diskutil. And it's going to ask me, hard, floppy, or cartridge? Well, cartridge. I'd like to format one. You can back them up on this too. We're working with drive 0. And I'm going to leave the default interleaf. And this is about to format 10 megabyte cartridge in drive 0. Press enter to proceed or break to abort. We're going to press enter to proceed. I figured you'd like to hear that. And I'll let this go. It doesn't take very long. Once more. I don't know about you. I know I did this with the 8-inch floppy drive video too. I love the sounds of these drives. It's just comforting. Kind of that marriage of like mechanical and electronic. Hard to explain, folks. That's for more philosophical folks than I. And I don't know about you, but I always loved sitting watching like a floppy disk. I've got a stack of floppies to format or something, or like this. I never minded sitting there and just watching it count the percent up and format them, count the tracks. Hear the drive chunk. There's something therapeutic about it. There was then too. It's like even back in the day, I always loved doing that. And I'm sure most of y'all are going to have understandably skipped this, and I think we're done. Cartridge formatted successfully, or successfully formatted, because I can read. Format another. No. Okay, and it unlocked the drive. So now, that's okay. I'm going to hit the reset button, and now we are going to reboot into XENIX. There we go. All right, and because this has XENIX 3.4 with automatic reboot, and this machine has the real-time clock, I'm going to hit F1, so I don't have to hit Control-D or enter the date. For those who haven't seen this machine or who are new, this machine actually has a new hardware design 7.5 meg memory expansion board. So I've got 7.5 megs of user memory, 7.3 megs of user memory-ish, and another 300K or so for system. So, and it has an MMU extension to allow that memory to be accessed as userland and not just swap. So here's my current time from the RTC on board. And this time I figured I'd let you watch this rather than skipping past it, just because this is what it was like to work with these machines, you know? And there we are, ready to log in. Let's log right in. So there are really a couple of ways that these drives could have been used. And one is direct backup. You can back up directly to the drive. The sysadmin utility will allow you to do this. And I could do a daily backup. I can back up all files. I can restore a file. I can get a backup listing. So let's do, I probably won't go through this all the way. I would back up hard drive 0 to cartridge, and I would back up to drive 0. And now, I'm not actually going to do this, and that's because there's already a video of this happening. You can check out Peter Satinsky's video where he did this with the Tandy 6000, and now the little thing is flashing across the top of your screen there. Definitely check that out. You can watch that all happen. So I'm going to do the other part. I'm going to break out of this and let this thing yell at me. I'm going to make a file system on this cartridge and use it as though it were a removable hard disk, because one of the great things you can do with this is give you the ability to transport lots of data, applications, or otherwise, but still access it as though it were a hard disk. So, first things first, I need to make a file system on it. And if I take a look at the various devices in dev, we're just going to pipe this to more, and I'm leading the witness here by filtering so I don't have to go through the whole list of devices. We've got CD0 and CD1. These are the 10 megabyte cartridge devices for drive 0 and 1. And if I look in the root directory, I scroll by. We'll do that again. I've got CD mount 0 and CD mount 1, so I've got mount points available onto which I could mount my disk cartridge. So the first thing we have to do here is make a file system. Let's just take a look at the help documentation for MakeFS on XENIX. And there were really only two required parameters here. Special is the device that I'm going to be using, so that's going to be dev CD0. And then proto is actually going to be the number of blocks, in this case, that I want to format or use. XENIX uses 512-byte sectors. I believe a block is a sector on this, but we're going to go with that assumption. So, looking at the technical specifications for this drive, it has 10 megabytes or 10,027,008 bytes divided by 512 sectors. So if I were to divide that out and say 10,027,008 divided by 512. So if I divide that out, I get 19,584 blocks. So here's what we're going to do. MakeFS dev CD0, and I'm going to do 19584. So that should give me the number of blocks necessary to cover the drive. Drive locked. We're spinning back up. And we've got an inode size of 4896. And we're all set. Now, it's very possible that my assumption about the block size is wrong, and either I have a file system that is too small or too large. But either way, I'm not going to fill it up, and I'm not going to put all that much on here, so it's not really that big of a deal. So let's take a look at what we have here. Again, in root, we should have a place to mount it. We do. So let's mount it. Mount dev CD0. We're going to mount that to CD MNT0. Okay. Little typing snafu. So, all right, now that we've got our file system made, let's change into the CDMNT directory. And we're there. But of course, we have no files. There's just nothing there. But we are accessing the drive. So let's do this. Let's copy. We'll make a backup of my release notes and XENIX 3.4 kernels and Z80CTL. Let's do that first, just to copy something over and take a look at it. So here I can copy rel star cdmnt0 /. And I can copy XENIX star cdmnt0 /. And actually, I'm going to copy x.tar because that is a backup of all the files that the XENIX 3.4 upgrade replaced. And we're done. Now let's copy the Z80 files over. Oh, I'm a dummy. Gotta put the 0 on there. And Z80CTL, for those wondering, is the program, the operating system side, the I/O subsystem that runs on the Z80 side of this system, because the 68,000 on these machines does not directly access the hardware. It goes through the Z80 subsystem. So that's the application, the Z80 code that runs over there to service and handle all the I/O requests and work in conjunction with the 68,000 to make this a working machine. Okay, so now that we've created this, let's go over and take a look. We have all these files. I think we need a README to describe what the hell this is. So we'll use VI. So there we go. I think we have a nice disk cartridge README file for those who come along and see what this is. And now if I look here, and look at where I am, I'm on the CD mount, I can cat my README file. All right, let's go back to root and unmount it. And if I list... Now, one more thing I should mention. I'm going to back this off a little bit because we're going to talk about ejecting the disk here. But if I back this off just a little bit, it's worth pointing out that when you want to remove a cartridge from this, you have to push this little button here to unlock the latch. Otherwise it's locked, you can't take the cartridge out. But of course, how does the computer stop the cartridge from being ejected when it's in use, say when it's mounted? Well, let's find out. It was just spinning down and now I'm spinning it right back up. So let's go there. And of course, I talked about this a little bit with the diagnostic. Now I can push the button all I want. Drive's like, nope, nope, y'all can go pound sand because I'm not going to let you out. So now let's go back. Back on the drive. And now let's U-mount it again. And now we're out. And now, one quick push of the button. There goes the latch. I'm free to turn the lever and remove my wonderful disk cartridge. What do you think, folks? Now, these drives were available, of course. I mentioned the MS-DOS controller and the fact that this particular drive could be used with the 1200 and I think the 2000. There was a cartridge system available for it. Obviously, I'm not going to cover this thing connected to a Tandy 1000 or other MS-DOS machine, but if you want to see that, you're in luck. You should check out TJBChris's video, link right there, where he has one of these 5 1/4 inch versions, newer version of these drives in a Tandy 1000 SX. So you basically get the same experience. So if you want to see Iomega disk cartridge goodness in an MS-DOS system, go check that out. Meanwhile, I think that's really all we've got for this. I got this thing working today and thought, this feels like something we should see. It's fun to sit back and just enjoy real hardware, real disk cartridges, things that I know are not going to work forever, but they work right now, and I get to play with them. And that is friggin' awesome. So, let's wrap this up. Well, folks, I think that's going to do it. From behind my Model 16B and my awesome Tandy, but not Tandy disk cartridge system, Iomega Bernoulli drive for the Model 16 and 6000 systems. Thank you for joining me. This was a whole lot of fun to go through, and yet again, I got to play with real disks and real cartridges and a real TRS-80 Model 16, and talk about something that probably not many people have seen, which is cool disk cartridge backup working on a XENIX system that isn't running on an Intel processor. So until next time, I'm TJBChris. Thanks for watching.